This is a rig test on a biped character as a part of creature development for Brent's Productions LLC. In addition to the binding that was done on this character that would be done after the tool, additional blend shapes and muscle jiggle were added. Here is a side-by-side comparison between the finished character and the rig created by the auto rig tool. A rig could typically take up to 80 hours. With this tool, the rig was created in 20 seconds. I was actually in research and development, creature dev, at Industrial Light and Magic, doing R&D with the team for Lucasfilm content. The way to load the script to use is to go into the expression editor in Maya, click on File and click Source, and then click the script, and it loads. The GUI is launched. First thing you do is hit the button number 1 to create the scale node to change the overall scale of the skeleton. Then hit Execute Sketch Skeleton, button 2. Change the overall proportion of the skeleton, and then put the joints into place by translating, rotating, or scaling the joints into the desired location. Only use the open channels. This maintains joint orientation. Next, hit button 5 to create leaf joints. These are the twist joints for the deformation skeleton. It'll be driven by the control rig. Translate the red locators to properly position the chest and lats. And as you can see, the biceps, triceps, hamstrings are all added on there. The chest and lats scale properly based on rotation of trapezius or of arm. The anchor, as you can see, is positioned that it controls the orients of the twist joints. This makes the rig entirely unbreakable, so you don't have to worry about a quaternion. You can see the flexing of the biceps. And on the wrist is unbreakable as well. The twist joints of the forearm work in any orientation. The leg is set up similar to the arm. You can see the leg twist joints twisting. Again, the rig is unbreakable. And when you rotate the foot, the calf scales out, causing calf flex, and rotate the shin, the hamstrings flex as well. An unbreakable rig. This is the portion of the GUI where you do skinning and delete excess leaf joints. You can see as you push the buttons that are pink, if you want to delete the hamstrings, triceps, biceps, pecs, or lats, they delete, and you can do your binding. This portion of the GUI, you create the control rig that actually handles the keyframing. Push button number 9, it generates the control rig. See, you start with the base rig as you've done in the previous steps. Hit button 9, the control rig is generated. The root can be translated and rotated, twisted. The spine is set up, the hips swivel. You can bend at the waist. Pretty standard. You really don't need that many joints in the spine to achieve proper deformation. The upper joint twists and moves as well, translates and rotates, while the upper cavity remains constant. The neck is pretty flexible, similar to what you might see a two-joint neck, typical. The head has a locking mechanism that can either lock in place or it can move with the upper body. The arms are FKIK. They translate and rotate. And they have the ability to lock to the head. So when the head moves, they can move with the head, or they can lock to the hips. So when the hips move, they can move with the hips. Or they can be in world space and just move independently. You can see the pole vector moving the arm orientation. And here are the arms rotating with the hips. The wrist control, here's FK, obviously moving the arm and wrist to forward kinematics as opposed to IK. And the fingers are easy to use. They can be hidden and entirely FK as well. It's easier to pose that way. Animators would much rather move a control than slide a slider on a control. It's more visual. The clavicle, the arm locks in place as a steady orientation. The clavicle is translatable. It is also autoclavicle. So when you translate the arm, the clavicle can move with it, or it can lock into place. The leg is set up like the arm, translates, rotates. It can actually lock to the hips. So when you move the hips, as you can see, the leg moves with it. It has leg raise and toe raise. The ankle can be moved in any position. And as you can see, to do foot roll, you move two controls. That way there's no setup standard for foot roll. It's entirely up to the animator. Simple solution. The pole vectors can either attach to the anchor controls or they can move independently. To create a base facial GUI, hit button 10 and our standard GUI is created. This is for purchase on the advanced cartoony rig setup. This enables the rig to become cartoony. You hit the button that says Make Rig Cartoony under button 9 in section D of the GUI. This shows what you can do squash and stretch with a standard rig once cartoony is enabled. Hitting the button, it adds a cartoony layer. The limbs now scale on linear interpolation. They can either be locked into place at value 0, there's no stretching. At 1, there's total stretching. And at 0.5 or whatever, between 0 and 1, there's partial stretching. The green controls can be pulled off to make an arc of motion, as you can see. And the whole thing scales, making Horton here's a Who type arm if you need that. The individual FK controls can all be squashed and stretched as well. There's total control over each joint with the exception of the ankles. That way any pose could be desired. An animator would far rather control everything than allow the rigger to control squash and stretch. You can see on the spine you control how much the squash and stretch actually goes. And the leg is set up like the arm. It squashes and stretches. You can move the leg around to different orientations.